us about your relationship with Frank Sobel.
One of my one of my first courses at Stanford was in a course in social psychology of education. And it was taught by N.L. Gage, who eventually became my very dear friend, mentor, colleague, co-author. And Gage had employed some research assistants to help him with his course. And this Frank Sobel was one of them. And I turned in my first paper, and Frank wrote all over it. And I went to see him, and I said, well, what are you criticizing me for? You don't know this field. And we got in a fight. He didn't know anything about psychology. He was criticizing what I wrote. And I resented it. And I went to Gage, who was running the course. And I said, you can read my paper, and you can comment on it, but that jerk can't. And we became friends. Because he admitted he didn't know anything about it. He was just trying to make a living. So that was our first meeting, and we've been friends now for, that was 1964. So we've been friends ever since.
Who were the vandals and why were they attacking?
Oh, God. He told you that story, too. My first AERA paper, I was running the data sets. In those days, you built the cards to check a hypothesis. Then you had more punch cards, more punch cards. You had decks of cards. And I had to program a big IBM mainframe and make sure it did the hypotheses. And it was like the night before the paper was due, and we were going to leave for New York. And my two professors had not even shown up to know what we said in the paper. I was third author. He was fourth author. And they were the first two authors, and they had no clue what we were doing or saying. And I was angry. It was 2, 3 in the morning, and I finally finished. I put the last numbers in, the last t-test, significant, of course, put in the numbers, and I said something like, I'm pissed that they don't even know what's here. And he says, yeah, we ought to get back at them. And I said, yeah, yeah, and I picked up the cards, and I flung them all around. And then he picked up the cards and flung them all around. We flung literally thousands of IBM cards all around, and giggling and laughing, and so silly, and we went home happy as could be. And the next morning, my major professor called and said, David, vandals have attacked us. That's what that was. And I had to say, Professor McDonald, that was me. I was letting off steam. And he was quiet. And he goes, do you feel better now? I said, yes, thank you. He says, I'll see you at 10. He was very kind to me. He knew what a jerk he had been, so I think he was feeling guilty too.
When I asked Frank how he would capture your essence in nature, he responded that your life represents a dedication to the well-being of others. And your professional work extends this concern for the well-being of public school students and their teachers. He also mentioned your integrity, the honesty you apply to your work, and what that work should mean in establishing, assessing, and revising educational policy and practice. Tell us about your relationship with Ursula Casanova.
Oh, wow. I can't tell you all of it, but...
Oh, PG-13.
Okay. I went to Washington in 1981 to spend a year to build a conference on research on teaching, to follow up to a conference that had been held 6, 7, 8 years before to see what strides had been made. And I went there, and I'd been recently divorced, and I went to Washington. I thought, great place to meet women. And, I was down at the U of A, and went to Washington. They gave me an office right across from Ursula, and I'd see her in the morning and say hi, and she'd say hi. And somewhere around the end of September, I got there September 1, and somewhere around the 20-something, we were at a conference together. We went out for dinner together, and then the next week we went somewhere out again, and we became lovers and have been together ever since. It was wonderful. It's terrific. So that's 27 years ago now.
And you have a blended family.
We have a blended family. Ursula has 3 children. I have 2 children, and we have 8 grandchildren. So we've done very well as a blended family.
To whom you're very devoted. That came through in everybody whom I interviewed. When asked how Ursula would capture your essence in nature, she responded that you reminded her of a coconut. Speaking of the neuroses, you are a tough, hard-to-break shell that hides a sweet and sentimental soul. Once a tough, rough street kid, you loved to joke around and possibly cry at a beautiful symphony or during a powerful theatrical experience. Speaking of Lee Shulman, tell us about your relationship with him.
Let's see. Lee came to Stanford. He started his career a couple of years ahead of me because I was delayed raising kids and working and all of that. But we're the same age. And he came to Stanford on a sabbatical when I was maybe 1973. It was his first sabbatical. And I was working at West Ed. And I heard this guy was doing some papers on Ed Psych, so I went to meet him. And we just hit it off right away and discovered we liked hockey together, and took our kids to a hockey game together, and our families merged. His wife was a charming woman, and so that was 1973, and we've been together for 35 years too, as friends who've gone through our careers together. He became president of ARA, I became president of ARA. He got some honor, I got some honor. We moved together. And it's been very nice to have a buddy like that through all the years.
He stated that over the years, his students have often commented on how encouraging it is to see two active scholars and scholarly activists, often on different sides of the same issue, remain so very affectionate, so respectful of one another's views, and so gracious and caring in their personal relationship. Tell us about the night that you two Jewish guys tried to take on two Irish guys, drink for drink.
You know the end of the story is not pleasant. Sobel, Frank Sobel, who you saw, and the wonderful late Dick Snow, who was a dear friend. We were in Washington, D.C. together with Lee Shulman and me on some conference I can't remember. And the two Jews went out with the two Irishmen. And Snow loved old Bushmills, and Snow and Sobel are drinking old Bushmans, and I said, yeah, let me have one of those, and Shulman's drinking his water and a glass of wine, and I'm drinking old Bushmills with my Irish buddies, and I staggered back to the hotel with Shulman propping me up. The Irishmen are singing bawdy Irish ballads, because they do that sort of thing, and I just had the worst hangover, and I was glad I had another Jewish guy to take me home.
Yes, he said he had to tuck you in night-night.
That's right.
Tell us
now,
about...
those are good friends, right?
Exactly. Tell us about Judy's pewter wine glass.
Oh, boy. People have been talking. Okay. Again, we became friends, and we stayed friends as our careers moved, and Lee invited me to the research center on teacher thinking to give some talks and work with the staff. And he said, why don't you come the night before? We're having some people over, and you can join us for dinner, and we're having Hutchins, I think it was, Robert Hutchins, for dinner. And I go, oh, God, I'm so excited. No, it was Joe Schwab. He was having Joe Schwab for dinner. I thought, oh, Joe Schwab, philosopher, a scientist. I'd never met him. He's a great man. Oh, I went early, get there, and I get into their house, and Judy sits me down, and Judy Shulman says, a drink. I said, some wine, so she gives me some wine. And I'm sitting there listening to the conversation, and it's so rich, and I'm feeling so good to be a part of it. And I look at the glass, and I go, wow, that's not my glass. That's crystal. That's really nice. And while no one's looking, I go, to hear it ring. And that sucker breaks right down the middle. The wine goes, and I'm looking at this jagged glass. And Judy looks over, and I says, Judy, the glass broke. And she says, oh, no problem, no problem. I'll get you another. And she gathers things up, goes into the kitchen, and comes out with a pewter cup of wine. And I thought, she never said a word, never lost her cool. And she knew, you know, for this dodo, you give him something metal, you know. And so she became my friend for life, too.
When asked how Lee would capture your essence in nature, he responded that you are a persistent advocate. Your favorite phrase is, life is good.
It is.
Tell us about your relationship with Gene Glass, who happens to be sitting here also tonight.
Well, the first time I met him, I was terrified of him. He was in his enfant terrible stage. I think he even had a beard to make himself look meaner. And this was during a time of his life when he was writing real good criticisms of people. And I would be terrified to say some of the things he said, though those people deserved it. And, but I hired one of his students. I was new in my job, and I hired one of his students, and we got to meet, and I was scared of him. And then we went to meetings together because we're in the same rough age group. And he's a little younger, he'll tell you quickly. In the same age group, and we met over the years. I think we developed mutual respect, but then we came here, and he was very gracious when I came here, and Ursula ended up in the office next to Gene. I was still a little afraid of Gene. The very powerful intellect, and when he was young, he swung it. He's much nicer. He's mellowed beautifully, I think. And I asked Ursula, I remember, I said, you're sitting right next to Gene, your office is near Gene. She says, yeah. I said, well, how is he? She says, oh, it's easy. I said, boy, I never would think Gene would be so easy. And she says, I taught junior high. So she pegged you, Gene. And we've been friends and colleagues now. We've been together at this institution 21 years for me, I think. And I can't ask for a better colleague. Certainly everyone knows what a rich intellect Gene has. And working with him on committees, working with him with postdocs and doctoral students, and on the stuff of the college, it's been my pleasure. I might add that to show you what a friend he is of both me and the college, he heard that I had been offered the deanship. And I don't think it was common knowledge yet, but the provost had asked me to be the dean, and I kind of got cajoled into it, and I said yes, and I was coming back from, I think, the office, and Gene comes up to me and he says, you going to take the deanship? I said, yeah, I guess somebody has to, and they want me, and I guess I'll have to do it. And he said, okay, I'll be your associate dean for research. Now, I had no idea I needed an associate dean for research. I had never, I was trying to figure out how to find my way home, and I thought, isn't that nice? So we served 4 years together as the two of the 3 or 4 decision makers in the college, and you can't ask for a better team player. So thank you. I think the college profited a lot from his joining our team.
He actually noted that too. He said when you arrived, it was 1 year after he arrived, and there was talk of a turf war, because both of you are such experts in the field. And so he didn't know if you knew that he urinated on your door to make sure that you knew. Make sure that you knew what your turf was and what his turf was. And your turf was obviously just your office.
He's big dog. He's big dog.
He's big dog. And you're so nice to him. And then when I asked him about a funny memory, he replied, there's really nothing funny about him. He stated that your most significant accomplishment is that after some fits and starts, and like Mark Twain and John McCain before you, you married well above your station in life. When asked how he would capture your essence in nature, he responded that you combine 2 contradictory qualities, passion and integrity. It is hard to be passionate about something, like the circumstances in which so many in this country are educated, and maintain an open mind that is willing to follow where the evidence leads. You care deeply both for the plight of those less fortunate and for the canons of scholarship that are the only sure path to a better life.
That's really nice.
I know.
Thank you, Jean.
And that concludes our first section of This Is Your Life.